All right. Welcome back to, what are we on? Week 6, lesson 3. This is actually the last lesson this week. It's kind of a short week this week on the lessons. It broke down. But this previous lesson plus this one's going to have you doing some more on your own, and so that'll take up some time. And then we'll wrap it all up together in one big video here at the end of the week. But this lesson we want to talk about, we've already talked about faith and how faith leads to obedience. And then today we want to talk about how obedience leads to dependence on God and complete and utter dependence, which really is the reward that we get of being faithful and being obedient. As I'm putting this together, my wife and I, Tammy, are only a couple of days away from celebrating our 31st wedding anniversary. Yay! And as all couples do, we've seen our share of ups and downs and good times. There's been hard times. And one writer said I could spin the ink from a million pens, and telling a story. And I could do that if I was to tell you the things I love about her and our life together and where the Lord has brought us. But there are a few things about my wife that stand out above them all, and they're appropriate for this particular lesson. And it's simply her faith, her dependence on God, and then, of course, her commitment to our family. But as we together have walked through some pretty deep, dark nights of the soul, it's been very comforting to me to know that somebody, is walking with you. Somebody you can trust, somebody you can lay all of your cares and your burdens on. And Tammy's always been that for me. But even as her faith, pales, how do I want to say this? Her faith is far above and beyond a lot of people's faith that I've encountered. But as great as it is, and as good as it is, as strong as it is, it literally pales in comparison to know what we know about the good creator of the universe and that he's on our side. As much as I want her by my side, it's infinitely more comforting for him to be on my side. And even more than that, the faith and spirit-empowered obedience that God brings about in our lives, it brings us to this place, which is a very joyful place, a peaceful place, where we can just simply depend on God for everything. In Psalm 121, verse 1, it says, "I lift my eyes towards the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." And just as we started, way back talking about who God is and why we need to know him, it's a comforting reminder to know that he created everything. He's walking beside us. And as we grow in our knowledge of him, our faith with him, and we are steadily and patiently obeying him, we just kind of come to know God in a much more deep way. And as we practice loving others and serving others and doing those sorts of things, we just grow to trust him more and more every single day. Obedience to him actually breeds in us an intimacy by where we can put our faith in him more and more and more as we just undergo the transformation into his image. And that transformation, that faith, that spirit-empowered obedience and dependence on him helps us to live out what the writer of Proverbs tells us in chapter 3 and verse 5. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all of our ways acknowledge him," or know him, and it says he'll make our paths straight. I like the way that reads because you and I know our lives are completely full of unknowns, twists and turns, things we can't predict, ups and downs, and a lot of times it's overwhelming to us. But it's our faith and our obedience and empowered walk by the Holy Spirit. It just helps us understand that he is the one, Jesus is the one, the Father. He's the one that actually provides for us and gives us the help that we need. And everything that's in our path comes from him. In Psalm 46 and verse 1, it says, God is our refuge and our strength, a helper who is always found in times of trouble. Now, that does not mean that he's always going to rescue us out of or from our circumstances, but he will always be there to support us as we journey and travel through those circumstances for his good, or for our good and his glory. I think of Daniel in the lion's den. God saved him in the den, not out of it necessarily. When the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went into the fire, he still had them go through the fire. Now, he protected them in it, but they still had to go through it. And it's this spirit-empowered faith and the endurance that's born and grows out of this steady, daily obedience to the commandments and the things that God tells us to do, where we find an incredible strength to just weather the storms of life, not because we're awesome, but because we have learned and practiced to just rest on him. Just like Jesus in the bottom of the boat going across the Sea of Galilee in a storm, the disciples were freaking out, but Jesus wasn't. And it's not just because he was God and just because he could calm the storm. I'm sure that was helpful, but he just knew that his time wasn't there yet. He knew that God could be trusted. Psalm 62 verse 5 says, rest in God alone, my soul, for my hope comes from him. I did that really weird. Rest in God alone, my soul, for my hope comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold, and I will not be shaken. As we learn to just depend on God, to fully put our faith and our trust in his goodness, in his nature, in his character, that's literally the most powerful thing that a follower of Jesus can learn to do. Complete, utter dependence. The big thing that it does is it just prepares us for whatever the world throws at us, whatever the enemy wants to bring to us. We know that we're going to be okay. Like Jeremiah says in chapter 17, the person who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence indeed is the Lord, is blessed. He will be like a tree planted by water. It sends its roots out towards the stream, and it doesn't fear when heat comes. Its foliage remains green, and it will not worry in a year of drought or cease producing fruit. Learning to rely and to be dependent upon God as we grow in faith and learning more and more of his character, more of his nature, and building that faith, that's the great blessing of our faith. What I want you to do is just kind of sit and take some time to think about this one. I'm going to give you, in the questions, I'm going to give you some passages to go study on your own. And I want you to reflect on them. I want you to think about what you've learned. I want you to think about how your faith ties to obedience and how those two things tie into your ability and willingness to fully trust God. I want you to answer the questions down below. And then I want you to respond to some of your classmates, just like we've been doing in the past. And let's get some conversation going. But I want you to take the time in these questions to go take those scriptures that I give you in the question, go to your Blue Letter Bible, search them out, contemplate on them, observe, interpret, reflect, pray, do all of those things that we do. You don't have to go through the whole litany on paper or anything like that, but use those skills to draw the meaning out of those passages and then reflect on the questions that I gave you there. Man, I've had a great time this week. Next week, we'll roll up to week 7. But for now, go study, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.